chapter 3 today. Daniel chapter 3. There it is. Lesson 5. 3 are delivered into the fiery furnace. This was one of my favorite stories growing up. My dad had this children's Bible that I have now, and I'm reading it to Everett. And this is one of my favorite stories to read them. There's a lot of different pictures of things that we experience in our daily life that we can pull out of there. A lot of different angles with which we can view it. So, number 1. Which king of Babylon made the image of gold? Nebuchadnezzar. A very interesting individual. In a lot of ways, he's a type of the Antichrist. But also, he is one of the few non-Jewish people to have a hand in writing the Old Testament. The next chapter 4, I believe it's chapter 4, he talks about his conversion and the things that happened to him to make him realize that maybe he isn't the supreme power after all. We'll see in this lesson his pride and his willingness to stand up for his pride. So, Daniel chapter 3, number 2. Did the king gather together all that were in authority for the dedication of this image? Yes. This was a big deal. This was like, to him, this statue was a symbol of his right to rule, I believe. And when you have a statue made of you, you're pretty important to people. No. It seems that he had this statue made. Nobody made it for him. But he still was very important. In the description in chapter 4 about what happened to him when he went nuts for a few years, to put it shortly. He had a dream that there was a great tree, and in the tree was all the birds of the air nested, and all of the animals lived in this tree. This tree was huge, and this tree was representative of Babylon. And so out of Babylon, a lot of people had work. They had food. They had security. Because there had never been a world government like it. And we know that the powers that be are ordained by God, even if they're flawed men that are behind that. So he's very important. Like, a lot of people benefited from his rule. So it's understandable why somebody like that, who is in charge of a kingdom and keeps it running well, like he did, would feel that he deserves that. We've all felt that we deserve some sort of credit for the hard work that we've done. You know, I think we've all had that moment at work. Well, man, if they just only knew what it would be like if I was gone or something, you know. And that's. And so he realized he was important, but he didn't have the right attitude about it. So we'll move on to number 3. Who cried aloud to fall down and worship this idol when the music sounded? The herald. I meant to study that word, and then I got distracted. But I'll tell you what I know about it. Hark the herald angels sing. Herald. It's a very special word for somebody that announces something that is of the utmost importance. no, they pulled out all the stops for this. Like, this was, if you didn't fall in line with this, you didn't appreciate your king or your kingdom, which sounds a lot like the resistance you get when you criticize politicians, for instance. And it doesn't matter which side, There's always going to, if you say, really don't like that they did that, somebody's going to be like, well, you must hate this nation. Yeah. You must hate people. Oh, no. But he's establishing that you must worship him, because the thing about loyalty is that if you can achieve it, loyalty from people that serve you will take you very far. Very far. And loyalty towards God will take you even further. When you ensure that everybody's worshiping you, or at least you would think this if you're Nebuchadnezzar, if you can get everybody to worship you, then they'll do your work as if they're doing it for God. And like I said, a lot of good and important things were happening, and certainly a lot of bad things were happening. But it was a great nation because the people survived. Great nations don't come out of people who don't survive. So we'll move on. Number 4. What would happen to those who disobeyed this command? Yes. That's one picture. So Nebuchadnezzar can often be a picture of not only Antichrist, but also I see elements of God the Father. So God requires worship and adoration because he deserves it. He's not a man. He was not given his power. He's only ever given his power. He's never had to take it. For Nebuchadnezzar, it's not that way. Nebuchadnezzar was given his power by God, and it says so in the next chapter. Being cast into the midst of the fiery furnace. That's exactly what happens to us for failing to worship the Lord above all others. But there's another picture coming later about how he corrects that. Number 5. What instruments were played when the people fell down and worshipped the golden image? That's a fun word, isn't it? Psaltery. Music. It's just, they put a K on it in the King James. It just is music. That's a, with every, it sounds like, once again, this is a big deal. They're pulling every kind of instrument and music that they can together to provide honor for this king and what he does. Number 6, who accused the Jews before the king? Chaldeans, I think. That's what I've heard. Yeah. So, there weren't a whole lot of people that were mad at the Jews in this particular instance. A few. Number 7. What 3 Jews were accused of not worshiping the golden image? Yep. They were taken into captivity at the same time as Daniel. They were very close friends with Daniel, which is why they're part of this. They were with Daniel during the story of the king's meat, where they abstained from the king's meat and chose vegetables instead, and they were healthier than those that were fed from the king's food, basically. The king, you would think, would have the best food because he needs to be strong, he needs to be clear of mind, he needs to live a long time. But they, because of the commandment of their God, were healthier, and so that's them. They were Daniel's friends that went through that with him. Number 8, describe the king's temperament when he heard these accusations. Yes. He was very angry. He had a deep love for these men. You see that whenever they go through their training period and then they meet him and he notices their wisdom. He notices how smart they are. So he's thinking, like, we're already on the same page. They're really smart. Of course they're going to worship this. And then he finds out that they're not. He's not taking it as we're obeying God. He's taking it as they are slighting me. And that was not their intent at all. Their intent was to obey God rather than men. Number 9. What did the king ask these 3 Jews? Yeah. He didn't want it to be true. And I'm sure if they would have said, oh, yeah, we worship them, he probably would have set fire to the Chaldeans for saying anything. But of course they were honest. And
Is this golden image, we're not supposed to worship idols? Chris, whatever his name was.
that's okay.
He's got this golden image that he thinks everybody should worship of himself.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Yeah. There is not, at this point in time, a man whose hands affect more people than his. And if a man doesn't think clearly about that, he's going to think that he's God. We were still in the era of what you would call God kings. So a lot of the nations at this time and before, when they had a king, they not only thought that this was just a man who led them, but also that there was a divine connection in this man. The Egyptians are this way. I can't think of others, but it was pretty common at that time that when people worshipped a king, they didn't just worship a man who was in control. They thought that he was literally a divine manifestation to rule them. Number 10. Who is that shall you out of my... Here he's showing that he does not know their God. He doesn't understand what that's all about, which is really important when you consider his rage. Because, well, he feels that the most important thing on the earth was slighted, and that was himself. Because he doesn't see anything bigger, but he's about to learn. 11. We are not to answer thee in this. That's said a little bit different than we might say it today. Basically, they're saying, we are going to be honest with you, regardless of the consequences. Number 12. What did these 3 believe that God was able to do? That's right. And they said that. And I think about that. The New Testament says about Abraham that he went and he was willing to sacrifice Isaac because he believed that if he sacrificed Isaac, that God would raise him from the dead. I think it's interesting to consider the different ways in which these men might have imagined deliverance. It's easy to get caught up in how they got delivered, but they've never seen a person get thrown into fire and live. So what do they mean? Well, I don't think they would have been mad at God had they been burned up, because they would have been delivered. And they understand this, that God's deliverance is a promise. And they understand, because they were there too when Babylon besieged Israel. They understood that deliverance doesn't always look the way that you think it's going to look. Sometimes it's... The important thing here is that they chose to believe in the character of the God that they knew rather than to believe their eyes. I could say for sure that having had similar thoughts, if at certain points in my life I was put in this position, I would feel like, God, why did you let him have this idea to make this idol? I don't want to have to face this. I don't want to have to be thrown into a fiery furnace. And I would be hurt inside. But that would be when I'm focusing on the things that I can see and the things that I wish for, rather than the things that are true. Because at all times, I believe we have a lot to learn about what's really true. Moving on to number 13. What were the 3 Hebrew children determined not to serve? That's right. They would rather die. Which, in the New Testament, it's said over and over again that a real believer will have that attitude. It's tough to... you can't really test that out very well in America. There's been a few people. For instance, the young woman in the Columbine shooting. The shooter, one of the shooters, told her, say you don't believe in God or die. Well, she told him that she believed, and then she was shot and killed. Some people have the opportunity, and those people that take it have I believe, a great glory in front of them in heaven. Imagine being a high schooler. You feel like your life is just about to begin, and now you could either say 5 words and live, or refuse and die. That's a lot. So, number 14. How much hotter did this furious king command the furnace to be heated? 7 times. A bit redundant. But it gets the message across. This isn't just a problem. This is a big problem, he says. Number 15. What did the king then command his mighty men to do? Yep. Number 16. In what were these men bound? Yep. Just took them right there, wrapped them up in whatever they bound them with, and threw them in. Number 17. Who died from the flames of the fire?
The men that threw them in there.
Yeah. The fire was so hot that it engulfed even the people delivering them there. A picture I can get out of that. I'll wait until a few questions later to go into that picture that I see there. 18. Where did the 3 Jews fall? That's right. Right into the middle of it, the hottest place. Number 19. How many men did the astonished king see walking in the midst of the fire? 4. Yep. Number 20. How did the king describe the 4th man in the fire? That's a subject of hot debate among scholars. Most of the newer Bibles will say, like a son of the gods, all lowercase. I think God is trying to tell us something in the way that he influenced this translation that we have. And I'll get to that in a minute. Number 21. How did the king describe Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Boy, I wish people called me that. Sometimes they do. They just use less words. But man, you go through something, and the most pagan, prideful person you can imagine sees you go through this thing in full faith, and then they just realize you're serving God. That's really powerful. Even if they don't believe that your God is real, if they can see that you're serving him, maybe you can show them how real he is. But it takes a lot of faith in God's plan for your life. It's easy to get caught up in the way that you feel things should be, but if they're not the way that you think they should be, then I'm trying to think of a short way to explain this, because there's okay, so let's say that you have a weakness in some area, and this weakness is causing you problems in your life, and you are working on figuring out how to get past it, but you don't know how to get past it yet. And you think to yourself, I should not be in this position. I should not be in this position. It's good to consider how things could be if you didn't have this problem. But at the same time, we serve a God who can work miracles, and he could just gone, but he often doesn't. And that's because he's teaching us something bigger than the problem that we're facing, so that we can get through to other people later. There's people, many people, that when they were, I'll use drug addiction, for instance. While they struggled, while they were having a hard time, they were distraught in themselves because they knew they needed to stop, but they didn't know how. And eventually they get over it. And then they're able to share that story with other people who feel the same way. Well, then you can look back at your times of wasted money, broken relationships, and now you get to save other people from that. That's in my mind, one definition of bearing your cross. Taking on the suffering and shame that comes with a cross to save others. We'll go to number 22. Did the fire have any power to harm these 3 believers or their clothing? God is in control. God is in control. Suddenly, the most powerful man on earth sets up a foolproof plan. Just make the hottest fire you can and throw people in it. That'll do the trick. No. There's something bigger than the biggest man. Number 23. Who said that their God had delivered his servants that trusted in him? So I believe that Daniel and his friends cared very deeply for Nebuchadnezzar. They saw what was special about him. They saw his potential. God also saw his potential. Imagine I would be emotional if I went through something and then somebody believed in a God that they didn't know before because of what I went through. That's really something to think about. They didn't complain. They didn't go, "Oh, the fire's too hot. No, please don't." They just said, "We're going to be honest with you." They didn't have to yell. They didn't have to manipulate. They just lived truly according to what they believed. Number 24. What decree did the king make regarding those who spoke against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's God? Suddenly the most powerful force in the world realizes he's not the most powerful force in the world. He thinks, maybe we ought to honor that. This is special. No other God has ever done anything like this. It's something to watch Nebuchadnezzar kind of go back and forth a few times on understanding his place with God, but eventually he gets it. And if you wanted that story, Daniel chapter 4 is it's one of my favorite passages of Scripture, because you get to see this man who doesn't know a whole lot. He just knows that God is the Most High. And he describes his heart and the events that changed it. Number 25. Then the king, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the of... That's something. I've been through that, where I felt punished by my adherence to the truth. And then later came benefit. An interesting thing about, we've all heard the term sowing and reaping, the law of sowing and reaping. The Scriptures, over and over and over again, teach us philosophies that are related to giving up what would be convenient now to achieve what would be great later. Because to take what you want now is to have inconvenience later. So if you give up what you need to, if you make the right sacrifices, as one might put it, you're not going to have to ask for it. It's going to come to you. Because you've given up on your life when you make the right sacrifices. Life then comes to you. The picture that I see here, let me see. Let me remember this question here. God's anger is kindled against the unbelieving, against those who do not worship Him. And let's see, where's that? God has no choice but to throw the unbelieving into the fire. But there's an answer. There's a protection. And that protection is the Son of God. And so you see here this picture of God the Father, and then what the Son does to protect us from His wrath. It's not a perfect one-to-one, obviously, because Nebuchadnezzar is not perfect. God is. But That's just how the types work in the Bible. It takes certain elements of certain stories and ties it to the main overarching story. Oh, that's right. That's what I wanted to say. So who died from the flames of the fire? The mighty men. The mighty men would be those that are above. They are strong. They are capable. They are the king's servants. And they are consumed when they throw them into the fire. Well, the picture I can kind of see there is though the devils seek to usurp God and they seek to fight him, they still do his bidding, whether they like it or not. And his bidding was to give us a choice. So whenever they try to influence us, tempt us to make that other decision, when they try to throw us into the fire that we're already protected from, they're going to be consumed by it. Which is an interesting thought to me. What Jesus did separates what is good from what is evil. In the same way that in the beginning he separated light from darkness. You don't have to go there if you don't want to. But just for a picture of what God does in our life. Genesis 1:3. I'll start there. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. These things were not separate. But he saw the good in there. And in his act of creation, he separates it, which is what God does with us. He looks at us, he sees our darkness, as well as the light that is put in us that was good. And he says, how are we going to redeem that? How are we going to separate that? And Jesus is how he does it. He uses I believe that he uses the fallen angels and whatnot to give us a choice. And in one way or another, they're going to try and throw us in the fire. And regardless of their success or defeat, they're going to be consumed too. A really big key here as well in this story, if I can go back to Daniel. The dangers of pride and just how easy it is to fall into it. So obviously it's easy for us to imagine somebody who, they're the ruler of the world. It's by their hand that the world lives or dies. And they bring success like nobody's ever seen. The biggest kingdom that's ever been. And they start to think in themselves, well, I've done this. I gave up sleep on this night so that I could be up to think about this and make this decision. I gave up time relaxing in my castle or whatever so that I could go to the battle and see it in person and make sure the right decisions are being made. All kinds of sacrifices. There's no way that Nebuchadnezzar is leading the world and not making sacrifices to do it. Not the right attitude, but he was making sacrifices. So you look at this man and you see all of these decisions he has to make, all of these hardships he has to go through. Not that there's a whole lot of description of that, but I know from observing people in leadership, if it's easy, it's because you're not in charge. So it's easy to see where he would get full of himself. He would say, if I didn't do what I've done, this world would be in shambles. And he would probably be right to say it. But he doesn't realize where his energy to do that comes from. So you think about a child. Well, I'm going to start with an adult. I'm going to say you've got this I'm just going to throw out a number, 55-year-old man. And he worked up from the bottom at this company, and he's always done a good job. Learned a lot in his 20s, gained like a manager kind of a deal as a in his 30s, and then he grew into being a very important person for this company and providing a very unique service that this company can't replace very easily. And he looks at all of the sacrifices that he made to make that happen, and he thinks, I did that. And it's good to be glad when you make good decisions. But first of all, who gave you life? Did you give yourself life? No. No. Your parents did, and by chain of events, God did. God made Adam and Eve. And then out of them we all come. So, first of all, your life is, you're not responsible for that. That's a gift. Being raised as a child. There is a certain amount of years that a child cannot survive on their own. They will die if no one takes care of them. And so there is investment that is given. Investment that has no promise of return. You can hope that your children will do well and then take care of you when you're old, but it's not a guarantee. And parents who are focused on that often monopolize their children and try to control them. The appropriate way to do it is to raise them to be compassionate and then try to earn their compassion. We're not owed anything, but we are given a lot. So now we look at this 55-year-old man. Let's just take one of his parents out of the situation. Does he succeed? Some do. Most don't, at least statistically. Did he do anything to keep his parents together? No. Did he do anything to feed himself when he was little? No. There is energy and benefit that is given when you are young. And this is all the gift of God. And this is what Nebuchadnezzar's missing. He looks at the difference that his existence makes in the world, and then he makes the mistake of assuming that it's his greatness. No, what God did is he gave you the energy and the opportunity, and you used them according to what he said, if you've done well. And it's something that I try to keep on my mind, because there's certain things that I'm good at that maybe others aren't. And I also see a lot of things that others are great at that I'm not good at all. And it's tempting to think that that it's just because I'm just, I'm so great. That's why I'm able to do this thing. No. I was given the opportunity. And I was given the energy to chase that opportunity. And I used it. I don't get to take credit for that. God does. Because the only reason I even had the wisdom to use my energy on this opportunity is because God gave it. And so it's easy to get lost in thinking that it's all you. I've certainly had that thought myself, and I try to avoid it as much as I can. Thank you all for listening. I'll close this out in prayer. Lord, we just thank you for your word. We thank you for Daniel chapter 3 in particular. We thank you for the many examples of different things that we do in the life of Nebuchadnezzar and of the Jews that served him. Lord, I just ask